Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in Canada and around the world. My name is Dr. Pierre Orelus. I was invited to be part of this great symposium that focuses on a very important theme, democracy. I was particularly invited to speak about democracy in the context of Haiti in relation to the United States and of course France, because one cannot and should not talk about Haiti without referring to those two countries in particular. So in this presentation, I will ensure that I provide an historical overview of the country that is Haiti, where I was born and grew up before even talking about democracy. Um, how did Haiti come about to be the country that the world knows of? Well, Haiti was not uh, always independent. Haiti was colonized by France until 1804. This is the year when the slaves um, decided to say, like Abekami would say in French, jusqu'ici oui, mais au-delà non. You can go as far as enslaving me, um, basically transforming me into animals, but you can only go that far. So the slaves decided to revolt against the colonizers, the French colonizers, in 1791, and by 1804 we were independent. Right now, when we talk about independence, we need to remind ourselves what forms of independence are we talking about? Are we talking about political independence? Well, in the case of Haiti, I guess one can dare to say that we are politically independent. But are we really? How about economic independence? Is Haiti economically independent? Um, I'm not so sure. And that's where I would like to begin with my presentation. Since Haiti earned its independence, I would say political independence for the sake of a better word, in 1804, Haiti has been dependent economically on the West, not because it has chosen to be so, just because Haiti was forced to pay for its own independence by France. Imagine a country that fought for its own independence and was demanded to pay for it. Well, when you have two countries that do not share equal power relations or let's say equal power relations, one often ends up being subjected to the other. Well, in the case of Haiti, we were forced to pay France a total of 90 billion franc. At the time, that's the currency they used. Now they use euro, and we started paying that money from 1825 until 1947. Just imagine how much money France now owes Haiti. So that was France. And the US, allying with France and other Western countries like the UK, they did not recognize the independence of Haiti until 1862. So just to tell you, from the beginning, Haiti has been isolated by the West, by the United States, by France, of course, by the UK and other Western, powerful Western countries. So the economic and political dependencies of Haiti must be situated in a very specific historical context. That is, Haiti, yes, fought for its independence in 1804, but because the slaves because they were slaves, they were blacks, who had to murder white French colonizers. So they had to pay a price, right? And like I said, the United States did not recognize Haiti until 1862. At that time, it was, the United States didn't want Haiti to have any influence on the blacks, on African Americans, who too needed the freedom. So it's understood why Haiti has been politically, economically dependent on the West, right? So now, going back to the theme that we are exploring for this presentation, that is democracy, can we really talk about democracy in Haiti? And if so, whose interest has it served? And this is the question I want to explore in my next, the next segment of my presentation. So, in my sense, to have democracy, democracy requires active participation of the masses. The masses, in other words, should have right to participate in any decision-making process that affects their lives. Unfortunately, in the case of Haiti, I haven't seen that happen. Perhaps in 1990, when the masses decided to vote for a former priest who became later president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, who gained about 67% of the vote in 1990. But that did not last long. In less than a year, the United States, in complicity with Haitian soldiers, and I must add the Haitian bourgeoisie, they overthrew Aristide. And since then, I don't believe we have really experienced any form of democracy in Haiti. Perhaps in 2004, when Aristide's former prime minister, René Préval, was elected in 2004, I would say to a great extent, yes, it was democratically elected. Even the second time, even though the second time it was contested, I would say the masses did go out to vote. But for the most part in Haiti, whenever we have an election, those who have the means of production, who have money, who can pay vulnerable Haitians to go to the street to vote for them, to die for them, they are the ones who have weapons to distribute to vulnerable, needy Haitians to basically attack their opponents, right? In other words, democracy in Haiti is not something where the masses actively participate in. It's the illusion they are given to. They are paid to vote for certain leaders who do not serve their interest. And who has money to pay the masses to vote for them is the bourgeois. The bourgeois, even though they may not be the one running for president, but they are the ones sponsoring candidates such as Jovenel Moïse, the current Haitian president, and even the former Haitian president, Michel Martelly, who were not elected to begin with. They were put in power to serve the interests of the few. The few include the very tiny bourgeois class in Haiti, including, the mulattoes, and that's in Haitian like myself, who may have grown up poor, but somehow managed to, move themselves up in the political economic ladder. All of a sudden, they become middle class. They forget about their roots, their origin. They make deals behind scene with the bourgeois class, with the elite. When I'm talking about the elite, I'm not referring to the elite that W. Du Bois, talk about, in his writing. I'm talking about the economic elite, not the intellectual elite. Those are bourgeois comprador. They all believe in, all they do, they believe in buying, selling, maximizing the profits at the expense of the poor. They don't invest in their own community where they have the stores, where they have their factories. They don't do that. They use the Haitian masses to work in the factories as cheap laborers in order to maximize their own profits. The kids go abroad to study. If not, they go to the most, the most expensive school in Haiti, than private school in Haiti. They don't have to face the dirt like the poor Haitians have to face when they go to school. You don't have to face the danger. Although lately there's been a shift in the paradigm. Both poor and rich are being kidnapped. Both poor and Haitian, both rich and poor Haitians are being kidnapped because kidnappers make no exceptions. They kidnap across class line. Now, again, to talk about democracy, we have to have active and equal participation of the masses in any political and economic decision that affects their lives. Unfortunately, in Haiti, we have a tiny group that get to decide who gets elected as president, as senators, as congressmen, or women, although we don't have too many women who have been elected as senators, as congressmen, as congresswomen, with the exception of Leslie Maniga, who was, and she's still alive, the former first lady. She was married to former Haitian President Leslie Maniga. Otherwise, most Haitian senators have been males. Most Haitian presidents have been males. So we cannot talk about democracy when you have, a system that enables mostly Asian males to hold key political positions as well as, academic positions. Most Haitian professors are males. So democracy requires equal distribution of resources across the spectrum, right? But we haven't witnessed that happening in Haiti. In Haiti, you have a system that allows a very small group of Haitian bourgeois made of mulattoes, and as well as Daxing Haitians who may have forgotten about their roots. They may have been born in a poor family, grew up in a poor neighborhoods, but because of their academic successes, they become professionals, they make deals with the bourgeois, and all of a sudden they forget about where they come from. Otherwise, Haiti is a place that is dominated by a tiny group that often invite the West to help them put in power president and serve their interest. So I'm referring to the bourgeois. I don't want to point fingers because they're also Haitian middle class who participate in this type of conspiracy against Haiti. So democracy cannot take place when you have elections where so-called observers from the West invading the space that is Haiti and dictate who should be president. That's what happened with Michel Bachelet, when he was put in power. The person should have been president was, Milan Manigat. Unfortunately, she was denied the opportunity to be the first female elected president. We had one that was appointed after a political turmoil. And to me, to talk about democracy in Haiti, first we have to talk about the school system, where Haitians tend to deny the opportunity about the cultural and historical roots. Instead, they tend to know a lot more about France, about French history and culture, whereas they don't know much or enough about Haitian history and literature, for example. So in other words, we have to have a school system that challenge Haitians to think critically for themselves so that they can act critically. Because if you have a school system that tells you to hate your language, that is Creole, that's perceived as inferior to French, which is an imposed language, we cannot talk about democracy. You have a school system that tells you to hate your skin tone and have, buy, cream that's gonna bleach your skin to make you appear white, then we cannot talk about democracy. Democracy requires, to me, critical thinking first and active participation of all people across the line, across gender, race, sexuality. Because in Haiti, we have witnessed a lot of homophobia, taking place at all levels. People who are queer cannot come out and say, I'm queer. I just happen to be a straight Black man. I'm very privileged to go to Haiti without having any fear of being targeted on the street. But queer folks in Haiti are hiding. They're hiding their sexuality. So how can you talk about democracy when those who've been, considered marginalized people are not allowed to be who they are, right? Women have been marginalized, even though they are the backbone of the country, right? My mom is a single mom. She was the one who really raised me. But women don't get enough credit. Haitian women don't get enough credit. They don't participate enough. They don't really get enough credit for what they have contributed to the country. And yet we talk about democracy. Who has been in power historically in Haiti? Has been mostly Haitian males, right? Predominantly mulattoes. And if they are not mulattoes, they are sponsors by the mulatto, by the mulattoes who have means of production. We cannot claim that all mulattoes in Haiti are rich. We have to really distinguish that. Because in Haiti, if you are poor, if you are Black and you're rich, you are considered a mulatto. Yet, if you are a mulatto and happen to be poor, you are considered Black. So we also have to talk about the class divide that we experience every day in Haiti. There's classism in Haiti, as well as colorism, dark skin versus Haitian versus light skin. So we cannot talk about democracy without, linking all the way all these forms of oppression intersect and impact people who may not have the privilege, like myself, to leave the country and come to the United States and become the person that I wanted to be professionally. There are classmates I grew up with who may have been as driven as I was, and yet they haven't been able to achieve what I've achieved, not because they are not as smart as I am, just because they've been denied the opportunity to go to university to earn a degree. They've been denied access to education. So how can you talk about democracy when certain groups have access to quality of education when others do not have access to it? There's classism in Haiti. There's colorism. We have to name them in order for us to really genuinely talk about democracy. So thank you so much for listening, and I'm happy to respond to any questions that you may have. I hope what I said makes sense. Again, in Haiti, to talk about democracy, first we have to go back to history, how Haiti became the Haiti that we know of today. It was a bloody struggle that led us to Haiti, to Haiti that we know today in 1804, all we'll call it Haiti instead. And then since 1804, we've been fighting against the West that really want to keep us prisoner politically and economically, depending on them. And they have been doing influencing elections. Whatever is happening in Haiti, the US always has its hands on it, as well as Canada recently, and historically France. So we need to understand, yes, there's been an attempt to have democracy in Haiti, but those attempts have been quashed by the United States. We had democracy in 1990 when Jean-Bertrand Aristide was elected by the masses. And again in 2004, I would argue. But since then, it's been, puppets, that US puppets, put in power to serve Western interests, not the interest of the masses that are really the backbone of the country. The masses include the women, Haitian women, who are to me the strongest women I ever known in my life. And that includes my mom. Thank you.